Okay, what I'm going to show you now is probably one of the most controversial methods of plastering. Quite often it raises outrage and dismay. I'm going to show you something that can cause that much disruption in the plastering world. So here we are at the beginning, the very beginning of everything. Not much to look at, I know. That is because we are looking at nothing. Nothing exists. Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. This nothing is called the singularity. You're looking at it now. It has been supposed that everything that exists now is contained within this singularity as maybe just pure energy. There is no space, no time, no anything at all. But suddenly, for reasons unknown, there was what is commonly known as a Big Bang. Then, suddenly, everything we know started to exist. We were on our way. 14.5 billion years later, this guy, on the 1st of September 2025, got up and went to work. A collection of atoms from the beginning of time. They make him and are dedicated to his existence for a fleeting while until they dissemble his physical form and go off to be atoms in other things. Until then, this is what the atoms did on this day. Good morning guys, it's Monday the 1st of September, and although it's a little bit chilly, it's actually quite a beautiful, clear, sunny morning. Now let's check my motor out here now. So this is Shogun Sport, and if you're a regular to the channel you will know I've got a slow puncher because there's a screw in this one and there's a screw in the front one as well. But this morning the tyres are looking pretty good. That's because I bought a new toy. Look, I bought a brand new pump because this was the one I was using and I thought I'd broken it because look, the end had melted from using it so much, and also they're quite big tyres. But turns out this does actually still work because when I bought that new one, I plugged it in here, and on this Shogun Sport, let's see, we've got one socket here, got a socket here as well. But the fuse has gone on that one, and also in the back, look, you have one here, but that one's never worked, and I can't find where the fuse is for that or why it doesn't work. So under here, look, I just leave this open now. I don't know if you can see it, right up here there's another little fuse box. Can you see? Let's turn some light on. Oh, I can't do it in this time in the morning. Little fuse box up there. Yeah, might be able to see them. Anyway, they take these silly little fuses, look. And I had to take one of the fuses out and put it in where I know feeds that to get the power. And this worked again. And now I've got two of them. So I need some fuses to go back in there because I don't know what I've disabled. It might be like, I don't know, electric windows, something like that. Now this is a Mitsubishi as well, and it's called a Delica. At the moment we are in van mode. I'll put all that racking up there for stuff. Now this is what I use for camping these days. So that's a bench seat at the back, so at the moment like, all the seats are folded up and out of the way. Otherwise it could be a 7-seater, or they all fold flat into a bed. Now I bought, there we go, new fuses. I love this motor. Very rare in this country now. Right, let's see if we can't get this in there. Dropped it. Pretty sure it was a turn that came out. Here we go. Look at it now. I could do with some light for sure. Get that off. Yep, we're in. Right, let's go to work. Okay, so here we are back on this job, and in this room we've been in here 2 days, and if you recall from the previous couple of videos, we're going over some rough plaster which was one coated and wasn't completed to a very nice level of smoothness, so that is why we are in here redoing this one. All we have left is these 1, 2, 3 walls. Looks like not much has gone on over the weekend. I was here on Friday just finishing up what you can see has been done already, and it's drying out quite nicely. This wall was particularly thick, and that's why it's taken quite a bit more time to dry out. So yeah, what we're going to do this morning is get these last 3 walls going. Now these have been primed with SBR, so the suction, it's a 1 neat coat of SBR, and the suction has been reduced right down to virtually nothing at all, just on the strength of that 1 coat of SBR on bare, porous plaster. So I'm happy that that is going to be hanging around for a little while. So we're going to get this on, first things first, just this little area. Excuse me, especially in the morning. And then I'm going to get cleared up in here and start prepping up in the next room. And there's quite a bit to get on with, I guess. So let's do it, shall we? Let's get started. Oh, before we do, let's go and have a look at my trowels. Okay, so here we go. Stainless steel, carbon steel. Now these have been soaking all weekend and this bucket was empty. So this is the amount of rain what we've had. So they've just been soaking in water. Nothing else, because sometimes, well, you say sometimes you can put plaster retarder in with the water, and that really does help eat into built up plaster. And you can see we've got this orange oxidization. And that's what the carbon steels do. As you can see, it's blushing off. If you are going to be soaking your trowels and you've got a wooden handle on there, it's not a good idea to soak the wooden handle as well, because it can only take so much abuse and eventually that wood will split. So yeah, got quite a lot off. I'm quite happy with that. If you wanted to top that up, you can just rub that up with a little bit of sharp sand or something and you float it. As you can see, these stainless ones need much less maintenance. That is actually just falling off there, look at that, it's virtually brand new. Okay. Look at this, I've never seen one of these before. It's a root slayer, and look at the blade on that. I saw it, I thought, crikey, what is that for? Looks functional, doesn't it? Looks like it does the job. Mate says, yeah, it was left here and yeah, it's been a bit of a lifesaver. So yeah, very handy little tool should you be digging in roots. And also, if you find yourself in the middle of a zombie holocaust. Zombie apocalypse, not holocaust, although there is an Italian film called The Zombie Holocaust. But yeah, come on, it's Monday morning. Holocaust, apocalyptic. Still two very undesirable situations to find yourself in, don't you think? Especially on a Monday morning. 25 years old, this broom. Yeah, lasted a long time. Although it has had 5 new heads and 7 new handles. Okay, let's have a little bit of a lesson about dirty water. So, like I say, these walls over here are going to have hardly any suction at all if they're to go like the rest of these walls did, which were treated with SBR like that. And I think one of the reasons why the suction has been killed down so drastically is because that SBR's had a good chance to cure on there. Now, I've always believed that SBR takes about 3-4 days before it properly cures. So when we did these walls, I did the ceiling because that was bare plasterboard, and then I SBR'd the walls that day as well. But I didn't come back to plaster those walls until the next day. So that SBR had held all night to cure. Because I think if you SBR'd it and went straight away over it within 20 minutes, that SBR hasn't had a chance to cure. So there could possibly still be quite a bit of suction on there. As well as using PVA, SBR, PVA, which one's best, I don't know, it depends on the situation, doesn't it? So if we PVA'd these, they would have had suction left on them. So, let's say that there's no suction on these because now they've had 3 or 4 days to properly cure. So we might want to accelerate our plaster. And then if you haven't got a dedicated accelerator like the Easy Mixes, the Speedy Mix, the Storm additives, they all do one to accelerate the setting time of plaster. Or if you're a little bit old school, you might be used to using a little bit of dirty water. Now, dirty water is a bit of a dangerous territory to get yourself into if you start playing with it, because it is a little bit unpredictable. Sometimes it's exceptionally strong, sometimes it does nothing at all. Now, why is that? Why is it? I put that much dirty water in there, blah, 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 blah. Depends what sort of dirty water it is. Now, this stuff here, this has been sitting here all weekend, this bucket. Okay, now you can see the water on top is clear, and underneath we have the settlement. Now this has been my splash bucket. This is where I've been washing my trowel off, and this stuff is 2 days old. Now that has the potential of being exceptionally potent, okay, because of the age of it, you know. Now, fresh dirty water is really potent, so this is a couple of days. If you left that all week, and let's say you left that 7 days, then the potency will start dying off. So yeah, if we left that and that was a week old and we left it, then it's got no properties to send your plaster off anymore. And you might as well just be putting mud in your plaster. Same as this one here, look, this is where I wash out my whisk. Look at this. Look at this. Scuzz on the top. And then down deep into it, this is the sludge that has settled at the bottom. So, like I say, this and this has the potential to be exceptionally potent, especially if you start adding it to something like bonding. Bonding coat is very sensitive to dirty water. Finish not so bad, and hardwool, it takes quite a long time to go off anyway. So, but we could use that, but we don't quite know how it's going to go. So what we're going to do to accelerate our plaster and stay within the boundaries of safety is got a little bit of water in there. All I'm going to do, a little bit of multi-finish in there, because that's what we're using. Get that little spin around. And we're just going to let that sit 5-10 minutes until we get the rest of our stuff all sorted out. I need to go and fill up the water button and everything. But that is starting the setting process. So obviously when I come to knock up for the amount that I need for those walls, that's what I'm going to add to that. Another way to do it, and a little bit more, in a more of a speedy way, is to put enough plaster into there. Because at the moment you can see it's really sludgy and wet still. Okay, that's because I'm going to leave it a little while. If I wanted to get on it a lot quicker, then what I would do is mix up that plaster until it was like really stiff, almost like a biscuit mix. And then just leave that, but not too long, leave that 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so, and then wet that down, and that will really pep up the setting time of your first coat. But we're going to stay with that. Now, what you'll tend to find me doing when we're using dirty water and stuff is I'm using dirty water from the previous gauge, so my dirty water tends to be quite regulated. So let's say I've got a few walls to do, I'll on purpose knock up, over guess it, you know, by about a hawkful or something like that. So I've got a little bit of a hawkful, so I'll knock up my first bucket, because you need to put 2 coats on, right, more often than not. Put your first coat on, and you've got a little bit of plaster left over. You turn back round, flatten that wall in, blah blah, do some other bits and pieces, look at some clouds or whatever, and then you've got a little bit of dirty water, you've got some old plaster left in there. Then I'll wash that round, wet that down, wash that round, and I'll mix into that, and that's what gives me my dirty water for the second coat to go on, and I can trust it's not going to go off any faster than that first bucket, because it's kind of the same gauge and it's just going to be a little bit behind. It's more of a softer, more gentle approach to putting dirty water in there. Start using stuff from buckets like that, and you don't know, that's when you start getting into the unpredictable world. And I mean, try it. There was going to be a time when you've used dirty wall like that, and then you've knocked up your plaster, you've got a hole full on the wall, you go and put your spud or whatever back in the bucket, and you go ding, and all of a sudden it's rock hard and you need to clean your bucket out because it's gone off on you. So just be careful with dirty water. Use it, if you are going to experiment it, use it in the way that I suggested. You're just knocking back plaster from the previous bucket, you know, and you can kind of get away with doing that 2-3 times. So let's say you get a bucket on, you've left a little bit of dirty water in there, okay? Then you might decide to either push on and put on an extra bit, and then you've left a little bit of dirty water in there. Then so this is 2 buckets you've knocked up. Then on your 3rd bucket, you might think, well, this is what I'm going to use to lay, put the 2nd coat on everything then. So you wash it round again, and then by that time, you've probably got to your maximum ability that you're comfortable with handling. So at that point, we've sped up that particular set, and you're not going to be knocking up any more until you've got that down and complete. So that's the time then when you wash your bucket out and you start from brand new again. Knock up a fresh gauge, leave a little bit in, a little bit of dirty water for the next coat or the next little bit of push on, etc, etc, etc. A good way to speed up your setting time is actually make YouTube videos about plastering and do something like put some stuff in your bucket and then spend ages talking about dirty water, and by that time your ball should have gone off. Spoke too soon about the weather. So we have been across the aforementioned area, and I have turned back straight round with that 20x5 carbon steel trowel, which is predominantly straight, and I've flattened it in. Now look, as I touch it, you can see it's pimping up and sticking to my fingers. That is an indication that it is still far too wet to do anything with it. I've mentioned before in other videos, sometimes the best thing to do with plastering sometimes is nothing at all, and this is a case where nothing at all is the best thing to do as far as these walls are concerned. Now these walls are SBR'd, and this is exactly how I was expecting them to go with reference to how the other ones went, and this has had even longer. Now I wouldn't have been using SBR because it doesn't really make sense to me in the way that plaster sticks to it, but if you are an avid follower of plastering videos on YouTube, you will almost certainly know who Kirk Johnstone is. Now he's gone on about SBR quite a bit, and through doing these videos I have had a lot of people comment to me and say they use SBR without any issues at all, even going over it dry in the way that we have there. And I watched a video of Kirk, and he was he painted SBR onto a sheet of glass. Then he dolloped a whole hawkful of finish, would have been board finish, so that's what he gets up there. He put a whole dollop of hawkful of board finish onto that sheet of glass. The next day, after the SBR had dried, so yeah, painted it on there, left it a night, come back, dolloped some plaster on it, let that go off, and then he hung it upside down, and then he put a hook in it so he could hang some weights off of it, and then he hung it in his garage. he is that confident that going over dry SBR is not an issue. So I'm trusting him, and I've been using SBR quite a bit more because I was always using PVA. It didn't make any difference to me. PVA, I was used to using it, and I was quite used to using it in the suctions of it and stuff. But sometimes SBR is better. Okay, sometimes, not all the time. It's not always the right thing to use, but sometimes it is. And sometimes PVA is a little bit better, depending on the situation and the time scale, the amount of plastering you've got to do, etc, etc. It's up to you. So yeah, don't write off PVA, but SBR certainly has a place, that's for sure. Right, we're going to leave this alone, and I'm just going to keep periodically coming back and checking upon it. Even with that, I don't know, maybe it might be picking up. Well, I'm not sure how it's going to go, because of course we mixed up that plaster beforehand, and then I nattered on for ages and stuff, so I don't know. So I'm just going to get on with clearing up in there, getting on with some prep to fill my time whilst I'm waiting for this, and then just keep checking on it, and I'll get back to you when it's ready to take it to the next stage. Okay, we've given it quite a while. I'm not sure exactly, hold on. So I just checked time, yeah, we're giving it about 20 minutes, and this is now kind of like, so as you can see where I touched it earlier, look, this is the pimple I left, now I touched it, and it's not doing anything near the same as that. Now, okay, what I'm going to show you now is probably one of the most controversial methods of plastering. Quite often it raises outrage and dismay, much like when Charles Darwin came back from his famous voyage on the Beagle to the Galapagos Islands, and he came back with his information and presented the idea on his origin of species, and suggested that instead of coming from Adam and Eve and the religious movement, suggested that we all descended from apes. Apparently, some people fainted. I think there was some, I think there was a woman in there, in this, wherever it was, that he presented this information. Upon learning this information, she immediately fainted, and another guy stormed out with his Bible, shouting, "The book, the book." So I heard, anyway. So I'm going to show you something that can cause that much disruption in the plastering world. And here we go with it now. So we're at a point now where we can put a second coat on this. But we're not going to do that. We're going to go back at it with that 20x5 carbon steel trowel, and we're going to give it another flatten. Again, just like normal, I'm just showing you this bit in the middle of the wall now, just for demonstration purposes. We're collecting up, okay, we're opening the trowel up, planing it off, okay, then we're collecting up the residue and kind of pushing that back in. So we're going, it's hard to show, oh look, here we go, look, more light on this wall here so we can see. So that is one coat and flattened in. Let me just run my trowel across there. So I'm opening the blade up and then closing it back in. Okay, compared to that, right, let's do that all the way around here. Okay, so we've been around these walls and done that to everything. So this has had one coat. Now you'll notice, even though we flattened it out, got a lot of this, it's very difficult to show, but I've got a lot of this sort of like puddingy stuff going on. Now this is going to be quite difficult to remove if you've only put one coat on just with a trowel, and that is why we are going to bring one of these into the equation. Now this is a sponge float. This one is a little bit more dense. See, the holes in it aren't quite as deep as some of the ones you might use for rendering, and also I leave it dirty as well because it still retains the sponginess, but also gives it a little bit of a skin as well. So I find that these finer ones, if you're just using it for multi-finish, it's better. You know, I mean, I give it a wash off, but that's about it. So what are we going to do with it? I'm going to wet it down first of all. And you see I have used this for sand cement recently, that's why it's great. And then we're going to apply some water to your surface. And then we're going to hold the sponge probe flat. Some people don't hold it at an angle, treat it like a tray. Don't, you hold it flat if it's to do what you want it to do. And we bring it up to this condition. Now what we're doing is livening up the very surface, okay? We're not overworking it. So what's happening is the main body of the plaster is staying at this consistency, this stiffness, but we've really livened up that very surface. And then just look outside. You take one of these, or you can remain with your carbon steel. And again, we're coming back to doing the same thing, taking the residue off and pushing it back in. Right, I'm going to do this across the whole ceilings. Obviously I just showed you that bit for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to get and do that across all this. Okay, so I've been around the whole area and done what I said. Now obviously the worst thing you can do is just leave this like this too long, because if you don't get back on it, then you're back into the 80s and you've got a brand new Artex texture on your walls that you're going to need to get rid of. Don't leave this too long, you need to get back on it pretty quick and get this under control. Okay, so there we go. We are back to a little bit pimply. You can see, it's difficult with the light, isn't it? That we're in a pretty neat condition, you know, even at this stage. So all we do now is treat this in exactly the same way as you would have done if it's two coated. Then we got to this point where we sponged it up and then flattened it in like that. Now we just trim it up and see it to the end in exactly the same way as you normally would do. Now, of course, in my opinion, this is the biggest plastering sheet of all time, and it's not actually a new idea. I'm not going to go right into one about it. It can work in certain situations. this being one of them, and it shaves a load of time off of your set time, and you don't have to compromise on quality too much. I mean, you can get it just as flat, but it does have a certain amount of drawbacks, and the way to get this down is through it pretty much impeccable timing, and the feeling of when you can and can't, you know, do it, sponge float it. It's very, very precise. Now, I did a video quite early on in the channel's life actually, and I think it was called The Theory of Sponge Floating. And I got a whiteboard out and everything, drew diagrams, but then I re-edited it, I can't talk today, re-edited it. I did that, anyway, I redid it, and I called that one the problem of sponge floating. So just go on the search engine, what is wrong with me today? Master Smurf 74 plastering, that's me. And then type in the problem of sponge floats and you should find it on the search engine, or you can just pan down the playlist and find it down there. So I'm going to carry on doing this and prepping up in that other room. Okay, so whilst we are waiting for that plaster to do its thing, I'm coming in here and prepping this. Now, as I say, that one coat sponge float is okay in certain situations. Now, looking at this ceiling here, hold on. Yeah, I've just got some springs across the ceiling, and as you can see, look, I mean, it looks like, you know, they've got a few little bits of board left over, and they're just making up. I mean, look at that, it's made out of all little panels. So there's a lot of scrimming to go on in here. And you know, look, we've got things like that going on, so that ideally needs to be straightened up. So I would suggest this is not an ideal candidate for a one coat sponge float. It's going to need 2 coats in here, and I'd say, you know, I've shown you how to do that. It does upset a lot of people, and it can be abused really quite badly and leave a terrible quality. But there is a good way of doing it, and I would suggest, if you're brand new to plastering, learn how to do it properly, if you like, in the first place, before you start trying to bend the rules and getting away with it. Jeez, look at it out there. Last weekend I was complaining it was too hot camping. And then let's wait for raining. Look at it! This is the second visit with Rufina Flex 2, and I must say it's looking really good already. Getting quite a bit of residue out there, although not much, we're almost there. I might give it just a third quick trowel afterwards. Just to prove a point about the quality you can achieve just doing a one coat sponge float. This is so dark, I might give it a ghost test. Ghost hunt. So like in the winter, when the nights get a little bit darker, and then if you're a regular plasterer, you will know you won't like anybody getting a torch or anything and shining it down the wall, because it shows up the tiniest discrepancies, ripples, little gouge marks, brush marks, whatever. So I think that's what we'll do in here, right towards the end. And we'll have a good look at it and see if we can find any problems with this one coat sponge float. I can tell this is turning out really nice. Notice as well, I'm always going on about my wet brushes almost as much as I'm going on about the 20x5 carbon steel trowel by Marshalltown, which is predominantly straight. Because I don't ever use corner trowels, so I'm always using these brushes which taper out at the end, which allows me to bypass using a corner trowel, and I find I can get internals very nice indeed just using that 20x5 carbon steel trowel by Marshalltown in combination with this wet brush. The other thing I like about this as well, because you see I was going on previously in another video, I don't splash the water onto the wall. Again, it's a little bit like sponge plating where I roll. Just bring the surface up and get an even distribution of water across where you're going to drink your trowel. Otherwise, if you splash it on, you get globules of water and you'll get different concentrations of water being dragged across the surface of your plaster. And there's a good way to start getting tiger stripes in your work. And tiger stripes are pretty much ripples that you didn't get out of the plaster in its early stages. And in the later stages, when you start getting more of this sludgy stuff coming out, you've tried to fill those ripples, the low points, with the sludge, and the sludge isn't as good as plaster. It hasn't got the right amount of granules in it, and when you are plastering, just leaving it, when it's full of water, it may look like it's really flat, but what happens is, of course, when that dries out, there's less particles in that fat to hold itself together, so when it dries out, those fatty dips that you filled out with fat are going to dry out and they're going to shrink back again. So what it looks like when you're finished will not be the same as when it's dry. Okay, so this is the third visit. I'm just giving it a real quick cross trowel, making sure that you are giving it a cross trowel, that you hold your trowel at a bit of an angle, okay, rather than square coming across, because it reduces the amount of drag. Now, because you do get the wall in such a good condition with the sponge plate, you might tend to walk away from it a little bit early. And this is the drawback from sponge plating, is it does ever so slightly weaken the very surface of the plaster. So you really do need to make sure that you close that right in, right at the end. Because otherwise what will happen is you think, oh, that's good. If you don't really close that surface in, not that it makes that much difference, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's better for the paint. I can always tell when someone's been one coat sponge plated, because you come in the next morning, whatever, and there'll be like a chalky feel to it, even if it is perfectly flat. So the surface does get slightly compromised, but it's nothing to worry about, because what will happen is when it gets painted properly with a mist coat, the mist coat of that paint will get drawn into the surface of the plaster and not just sit on the surface like a skin. It gets drawn in there as more of a stain. It actually becomes part of the plaster, not just a layer on top of the plaster. So when it gets mist coated properly, if there is any lacking strength on the surface because you one coat sponged it and you battered it up with that sponge float and really brought all the fats up and stuff, that paint getting back into that surface, deep into it, creating the roots for the decent paint, the decent coat of paint that goes over the top, that brings the strength back to the plaster. So here we go, look, right to the very end. I like to get a good quality little inch brush down your internals, and so you can what it looks like now. I want to get out the light. Run your inch brush down there, which is exactly what your painter's going to do. So you're going to need a half decent quality one so you don't leave any brush marks to speak about. And I find that really does make a really nice crisp, good looking corner. And if you do this, your painter's going to love you for it, because he's going to find that if he needs to cut in different colours, obviously the ceiling more likely going to be white. Sorry, I think I was showing you the footage then. Ceiling's going to be white, so if this is a different colour, he's got such a nice line to cut in with his paint himself. But otherwise, if you leave it like that, he's going to try and his brush is going to catch bits and that, and you get this little wiggly line across the top. So by doing this, I find it really does help it out. At least I've noticed it helps me out whenever I have to paint my own work. So another situation which is really good to get used to using your wet brush like that tapers out, and a little inch brush, and you're not going to do it so successfully with a corner trowel, is this. Now I don't know if you can see it very well, but this will, look, it's on a skew, yeah, we're coming at an angle, so these aren't proper right angles. So say this angle here is very sharp. It's a bit of a nightmare getting your hand in there with your trowel, because obviously you need to get in and keep a nice line without your hand hitting this side. But as you can see, you would struggle to get a corner trowel in there because of the angle of it. But the wet brush and the little inch brush has had no problem at all. And kind of a little bit the same on this one as well, because this angle is wide. Okay, so running a corner trowel down there, you're going to be snaking around all over the place because you can't use the two fins of the corner trowel. So that's a good way to see. That's the angle we got there. See, we've got the sharp angle there. Okay, so as always, don't forget, trim off those little curly bits down the bottom, so that when the skirting board goes on, the carpenter's not going to be using swear words in the same sentence as your name. Okay, so hopefully this is going to come out pretty good on the video. So this is one coat sponge float. Now it's going to be a little bit difficult because it's starting to discolour as it's starting to set, and it shows up the tiniest little thing. Oh, sorry, it's flashing. See here, the directions of which the trowel has gone. So the discrepancy there, see, I just barely touched it with my fingers, and that's roughed up the surface. That's how much we're scrutinising here. So that looks like it could possibly be a ripple, but it's not. You can see if I come here as flat as I can against the wall, it's just a discoloration as the wall starts to brown off. So just come over to this one and cast the shadow upwards. Now there's a tiny, tiny, tiny little imperfection there. Look where that is. Zoom in there, tiny, tiny, look at that. You can see the granules of the plaster. Okay, so I've turned all the rest of the lights on, so now we've got light bouncing all the way around the room rather than a directional light, you know, just casting a shadow. And this is that imperfection that we noticed earlier. I'm in the light. I'll get out of it. There it is. Spot there, I seem to be a bit proud for some reason, because that's the thinnest bit. That's the first bit that's starting to brown off. Eventually the whole wall will go this darker colour. Okay, so we're in this other room now. I've got pretty much half a bag there and a fresh bag there. And that's all the material I have at the moment. I haven't spoken to Matey over the weekend. I'm sure I will speak to him at some point today. But don't worry, even though that is all the material we've got, I'm probably going to mix up a bag, that whole bag, starting here somewhere, which is a very, very simple room. No windows, no beads, no nothing really. Oh, there's one socket there. And obviously the eye out there, look. But nothing to speak of. Door frame's going to go in there, so there's no beads going on there. So yeah, I'm going to knock up that bag, see how far it gets me. I'm going to get the ceiling, maybe one of these larger walls, maybe a little bit more, and pick off this little wall as well. We'll see how it goes, and then I'm going to put the second coat on it, so we're not one coat sponging in here. And then just see the day out whilst this is all going off in here, to start prepping around. I've got lots of prep to do. It's surprising when somebody does do, you know, all these little panels like this and gives you a load of scrimming to do, how much extra time it does put on things. Oh no, that's not been finished. Need a bit of plasterboard to go on there. This is all MDF, so we're not touching that. So yeah, I'm just get some scrims up, get some beads up. Hopefully we've got enough beads, they're down there. Got some scrim, which is kind of like the cheaper white scrim, which is alright, it's fine, but with scrims and that, you might find it's, if you put them up and leave them for quite a long period of time, the white scrims might start falling off by themselves if you don't get over and plaster them soon enough. So what I tend to do, if that is the case and it's going to be left a while, is I'll just get a couple of staples in there as well, which I've always got knocking around. Where is my stapler? It's around here somewhere. I'm sure I'll find it soon enough. And on plasterboard, staples are pretty good for putting beads up as well. So that's what we're going to do the rest of the day, I think. Alright guys, thanks for watching that video. Just editing it now. I seem to be able to speak. Yeah, thanks for watching. Another long video, wasn't it, eh? Yeah, great. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, what can I say? There's some other videos on the playlist. Have a look at them. You might prefer them. In the meantime, don't forget the Facebook group, Plaster My Smurf 74. Come over there if you want to have a chat with me and other plasterers. Failing that, just carry on watching the YouTube stuff. And I'll see you on the next video, which won't be too far away at all. Alright, see you then. Take it easy. And again, thanks for watching.